Hey guys, this is Voxide and this is the effect that we're gonna be creating today. Alright, so basically we are having a light emitter generating these magical looking thing, trails. And before we get started, I just want to let you know that this exact project is going to be available for download, so make sure you check the description of the video if you want to download this project, in case maybe I forget something or you get stuck. So be sure to check out the project file if you encounter any problems. And also we're going to be using Trapcode particular, so make sure you have the plugin installed, and we can get started. So I will make a new project. Save this, make a new composition. Let's make this just a regular HD, just so it works faster. And let's see, the first thing we want to do is create a new background layer. And for this background layer we're gonna use a ramp, so go to effect, generate ramp. Let's use a blue for instead of our white color. We're gonna go with sort of a dark blue over here. We can always just come back and change this anytime in our project. And let's see, now we can create a new layer for our floor. So I will name this floor, enter, and then we can use a generate ramp, and we can use a radial ramp for this. I will drop down the start of the ramp point. I will make sure this is centered, so or maybe just around the center. Let's change the color of this point to maybe something like a blue. And then for our end color we can use a dark black. And let's press F4 so we can access the 3D options, and I will make this 3D by clicking on this button here. Press F4 again, go to our mode, and then set this to screen. And now this will blend the black part of it will be blended with the background. And now with our layer selected, we can press W to access our rotation tools, and on the X axis I want to rotate this 90 degrees. So while holding shift I will just rotate this twice. Now with I will go to my selection tool, and we can just place it down below and just make a nice looking floor. Also this layer I will press S and just make our floor a little bigger. And we can also add a blur to this layer, just so it's more blended with the background. We don't have the sort of like these sharp edges right over here. So you can see with the blur activated, it's a much nicer effect, a more smooth effect. Alright, now we can add our text layer. Let's add a new layer, text. Let's type our text, magic intro, and you can see for our text I already set up sort of a desaturated light pale blue color, which was the same settings as the last project. So just keep in mind that this isn't completely white. This has a small subtle blue tint to it, so just something to keep in mind. And let's edit this a bit. I will select my magic part of the text, and I will just make this sort of match the size of the word. So this looks good. I mean, you can I'm not gonna spend too much time formatting this text because this isn't the point of the tutorial, but just to make something look maybe half decent. And so here's a very important part. Whatever layer you may use for this technique, make sure it is inside of a pre-comp. So whatever layer you might have here, whether it's a text layer or a logo layer or whatever you import, make sure with the layer selector you go to layer, pre-compose, and then rename this. Let's see, text pre-comp, and do this. So it's inside of a pre-comp, which is very important later on in the tutorial. So I will press F4 and make sure this is also a 3D layer. And now we can add a camera to the scene. Let's go to layer, new camera. I will use an angle of 70 just so it's a little wider, so the effect looks better. And with our orbit tool, which is C on your keyboard, we can just maybe make a more interesting angle, so the effect will have a nicer effect to it. So maybe something like this. This should be fine. Alright, so now we're ready to make our light emitter. Well, probably the hardest and the most difficult part in this tutorial will be setting up the light so it swirls around our object or layer, whatever you may have in the center. So we basically want the emitter to just make a couple of swirls around our center of the scene, and then sort of start below and then fly upwards and then some fade out somewhere around this part. So it starts around here, makes a couple of swirls, and then fades out. So the way we can achieve this look is let's make a new solid layer for now. Sorry, let's make a new light. Name this light emitter, and you can see the intensity is set to 100, the light type is set to point, and the color is set from the previous tutorial to sort of a pink color. So keep that in mind. Now I will hit OK to create the light. And we want the line to be right in the center of our text, or rather in the center of our scene. So in order to achieve this, we can go to the position into our light layer. So I will press P to give me the position, and I will set the position to be so let's see, our center of the screen is probably gonna be if you go to your composition settings, it's gonna be the width and height will give us the X and the Y value, and we will divide the value by 2, and this will give us the, so you can see if I divide these values by 2, 640 by 360 is the values that we're gonna use to bring this light in the center of our scene as far as X and Y values go. So I will cancel this and I'll show you what I mean. If I set now the position to be 640 by 300 and what was it, 60 I think, and oh actually no, sorry, let's try 960 by 540, and let's try a value of 0 for Y. So you can see this is not matching the center of our scene. So to make this easier, I will just go in my costume view, and here if I make this background transparent, let's see how we can center the light then, just so it's right in the center of our scene. Let's make a new null object actually, and if I make this 3D and go to our position, well, yeah, actually our initial values were right, so sorry about going back and forward with this, but actually just set the lights to the initial positions that we've come to, so which is the half the value of the width and height of the composition. So what was it, 640 by 360, and 0 value on the z-axis. So this is now right in the center of our screen, which is what we want. And let's remain in our costume view for now and add a new null object. And this null object I'm also going to make 3D. So now they're exactly in the same position, right in the center of our scene. And I want to rename this null to be emitter target. And now I will parent this light to the null. And you can see what happens if I move the light in Z space like this. I will give it a Z value now. And in our emitter target, we go to rotation and choose Y rotation and increase this. You can see how the light is now orbiting around our null object, which is exactly what we want. So I'll set this back to 0 and set the position back to 0. And in order to have better control over our Z value of the position, we can right click this and choose separate dimensions. And now we just have our Z value to work with, which is a lot easier to animate. And let's see, well, I want this, the actual light trail effect to be 150 frames long. So, oh, and also what you can do with this is if you go to your emitter target position, so press P, You can also right click this and set separate dimensions. And now if I offset the Y position, you can see now we can make the light start from below and work its way up. So which is exactly what we're gonna do in our active camera now. I can set a keyframe for the Y position somewhere around, or rather near the floor. So I will set the keyframe for this position right over here at the beginning of our timeline. Move to frame 150. Let's make sure we're accurate with this. So 150, and now I will drag the light just so it fades somewhere around the top of our text. So now you can see it's just a basic animation going from below and then towards the top. So now the way we add our swirls is we need to create some distance between the light and the actual target. So to achieve this, we can offset the Z position of the light. So let's say I will go in my costume view and I want the light to start at the Z position of let's maybe say 250. And now if I go to my emitter target and press R to give us our rotation, I can animate the Y rotation so it creates the swirls around the text. So I will go again to frame 150 and add a value of 720 degrees, which is basically just going to give us 2 swirls. So I will just set times 2 right over here and add another keyframe, and now you can see the light goes once and then another time, so basically 2 times around our text. And basically here if I go to my emitter and increase the Z position, so basically increasing the distance between the emitter target and the light, then we can achieve bigger swirls sort of. And you can also animate this effect, which is what I did in the original project. I went sort of like in the middle of our light animation and I added a keyframe for the Z position. So this is gonna be as big as the swirl will get basically. And in the beginning of our timeline I set it to a smaller value here. So basically what this does is create a bigger swirl over time. So here you can see the swirl gets bigger and bigger, and then it gets smaller towards the end of the animation. So I'm gonna add another keyframe here, and this will be more apparent once we add our Trapcode particular and we can create the trail so we can see exactly the trajectory the light is taking. So actually let's do that right now. In our active camera we can add a new solid layer. This will be our particular layer, and let's add our Trapcode particular. Alright, so let's set our emitter to be a light emitter, and let's set the X, Y and Z size to be 0, and let's set velocity and velocity random and all these settings, let's set them all to 0. Alright, so now we can check out and see how the light trail is actually affecting our light. Alright, so it's starting right over there below. It makes one swirl, makes another swirl, and then it just finishes off. Alright, let's animate the intensity of a light. So if I go to my emitter light and press T, this will give me the intensity. I will set intensity to 0 right at the beginning, so I don't want any frames emitted at the first frames. We want them to sort of fade in over time. So at frame 25 I will add a keyframe for 100, and so this will basically just fade in our particles over time. And now I want them to fade out as the light finishes its path. So probably somewhere around here I will add another keyframe, sorry, for intensity. And right where it finishes going in its path, we can set a keyframe for 0 then. And this will just fade in our particles and then fade them out. Let's add more particles so we can see this more clearly. Alright, and before we make any adjustments to our particles, we want them to be obscured by this text layer. So what I mean by that is you can see right over here basically our light and the particles should be behind our text right here in this part. And in order to achieve this effect, and this is why we actually pre-comped our original text, is if we go to, let's see, which was it, visibility, and then obscuration layer, we choose text pre-comp. You can see now it's behind our text, and it just gives it an overall more of a 3D feel, and it just helps sell the effect more because it actually interacts, the elements actually interact with each other, which makes it a more of a realistic sort of effect. Alright, so now it's behaving like we want, and we can just make our adjustment for the particles. So if I go in my particles tab, let's start with maybe increasing the life to 4, and let's see, we'll leave the particle type to sphere. Let's add some variety to the life, so I will add 50, and size I will make this smaller for now, so maybe 2. Let's see what else I made in the original video. Well, I added gravity right off the bat. So if I go in my physics tab, we can set some, we can give this some gravity. Or maybe let's try a value of 22 for now, and I will set this to half resolution so it works faster. And we actually want the particles to sort of interact with our floor layer. And speaking of which, I don't want the light to be affecting our floor layer. I just want the floor layer to remain constant as far as lighting goes. So if I go in my material options for the floor layer, we can turn off accept lights. So I'll just set this to off, and now you can see the light isn't affecting our floor layer. Alright, but we want the particles to be affecting, interacting with our floor layer. So back in my particular layer, we can go to, we can change the physics. So the physics models we're gonna change to bounds, right? And now in our bounds tab, we can choose a floor layer, which will be our floor. And now you can see it's pretty much just bouncing off our particles, but we don't want them to bounce. So I'll set the bounce rate, the bounce value to 0. Bounce random doesn't matter if this is the 0, but I will set this to 0 also. And I don't want them to slide. So currently, well, you can see them sliding, but they will slide once we add some velocity, and we don't want that. So I'll just set this to maybe 35, just so it's a little friction between the particles and the actual floor layer. And let's add some velocity from motion. Let's add a value of 10, see how that works. Alright, now you can see if I increase this value, you can see it inherits some of the velocity from the emitter, from the light in this case, and you can see the effect that it just spreads them out based on the velocity of this layer. But we don't want such a high value here. I will just use 10. Let's use some velocity, actually, maybe 25, value of 25, actually maybe 15, and add some velocity random, 20%. So now we have a more interesting effect, a more interesting look for our trails. And let's see what else we can do. Well, let's set this particular layer to add, just so it the particles blend better with the background and all the other layers. And let's give it some color now. I think this is a good time to add some color. So the way we do this is, if you go to, which one was it? Set color. I will choose overlife, and now we can edit the gradient over here. So let's start off with this preset of the gradient, and I want to add sort of like the pink look. So I'll just add some points on this gradient, just so it creates an interesting effect. Maybe something like a violet over here, and this should be maybe more of a pink over here. And you can mess around with the settings as much as you want until you get a pretty interesting effect. So you can see now we added some color, and let's set our transformer to add. So you can see now right in the center where there are a lot of particles, they actually overlay each other, and with the transform mode of add, this will make them brighter. So this is the effect that we want to achieve. Let's add more velocity, maybe 20, just so they're a little more spread out. And let's add some glow. We can add some glow now. So if I go to Effect, Stylize, Glow, and let's leave one layer of glow like this, and I will duplicate this by pressing Ctrl D. And now I can spread out the radius of this second layer of glow. So you can see this creates a nice glowing effect. And let's go to full resolution so we're seeing clearly what's happening. So this is pretty good. I'm actually kind of satisfied with this, but in our original example I actually made the particles flicker, and the way we can achieve that effect is if we go to opacity over life. So this gradient right here controls the opacity over life. So basically if let's just use a preset for this example. You can see now they fade out towards the end by using this gradient right here. And in order to make them flicker, what I did was I created sort of like a spike gradient here. So here's what I mean. I created sort of like these spikes. So basically what this does, oh no, I don't want them to be visible towards the very end. So basically what this does is for a value of, if a particle has a life of 4 seconds, then basically the second will be here right in the middle. So this is going to be 0 seconds and then 4 seconds. So it's basically over a period of 4 seconds it's going to go 0 opacity, 100 opacity, 0, 100, 0, 100. So it creates sort of like a flickering effect, which is what I had in the original example. I'm not sure if it's if you can see that clearly. Maybe the life, I think it's too big, and actually I want the life random to be even higher. And basically this creates a flickering effect, and you can mess around with the settings and try out various graphics to achieve a different, or rather more of a look on your taste. Alright, so what I want to add now is, in our original example, we had our original light, so our main particles, which is this trail right here. I wanted to add another layer which basically emits from this main layer. So I'll show you what I mean by that. If I go to my aux system, which is auxiliary system, and turn the emit on, set this emit to be continuously. So you can see this now, but if I increase the gravity for this, so I'll add a gravity of maybe 50. Actually, let's increase it even more, maybe something like this. You can see basically what this does is each particle that we already created is generating even more particles. But we don't want all the particles to be emitting particles. We only want like every 4 particles, I want to have 1 particles which emit even more particles. So I will just set the emit probability to be 25%. So this is gonna choose 1 out of each 4 particles to emit even more particles. And I will set the life to maybe 1 second. See how that looks. So they're longer now. And let's set the size to be 1. Alright, so this is coming close to what we had originally. We need some velocity, so they're a little more spread out. Alright, so this looks fine. Maybe the life is even maybe set the life to be 0.6, something like this. So basically we have another second layer of particles which are emitting from the original layer, and they're just falling down faster basically because we have more gravity here, but we don't actually want such a high value for our gravity, so I'll just go with a value of 250. So something like this, and let's now increase our life back to 1. Our opacity over life, I actually want these to fade out as they age. So I will set this preset right here, and actually maybe even increase the life even more, 1.5, And let's add some color for these particles. Let's set the transformer to add, so they overlay each other. And let's see, color from life, color over life. Let's use a, actually just, I think, yeah, for our original example, I just used this white to blue to dark blue preset. So this is coming pretty close to what we have. I think we're actually done with the particular layer. So you can see now this over time, the particles are generating the trail, and right off where we set our intensity to 0, they fade out, and then they just drop on the floor. Something else you can create. In our original example, I actually had another layer for some ambient particles, so let's create that. I will add a new solid, and let's see, this is gonna be ambient particles, and for this I will just add another particular layer, and let me just solo this so it works faster. And I want a velocity of something really small, maybe like 5. I want to set the emitter type to a box, and then just increase the size of the box, just so it sort of fits the whole screen, something like this. And let's go in our particle settings, and let's decrease the size a bit, increase the size random and opacity random, maybe something like this, maybe the size even less. Let's add our color. I just used a pretty light blue for this, and if I set this particle to add, so it blends with the other elements, and turn off and just unsolo this, well, now you can see we have some nice ambient particles. And for our original example, I set the opacity over life to be this preset over here, so they fade in and then they fade out over time. So now you can pretty much make whatever camera animation you want. Everything is 3D, which is great, because you can have any kind of camera animation, which is gonna sell the effect even more. And if we go to with our camera selected, if you go to camera settings and increase the angle of view to something like 90 maybe, and let's zoom in a bit, you can see now the effect is even better, because we have a wider angle for our camera, and this will sort of create some distortions when you orbit around it, which just creates some more of a depth kind of a illusion, which is, you know, it looks a lot better. Alright, so make sure you check the original project file, which is available for download. Just check the video description. And maybe I forgot something, well, in the original project I also used the layer for I actually used the optical flare layer. So just if you have access to optical flares, then you can just set your optical flares to track lights, set this to add, and yeah, this is pretty much it. Or of course the scale was a little lower than that, but I think I pretty much covered all of it, and this is just the effect that I wanted to share with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.